Invocation to the Supreme God, to the Great Divine Father and the Great Divine Mother, thank you for your priceless blessings, for your divine light, divine love, divine power, divine healing, guidance, mercy, help, and protection. We thank you. To our great spiritual teacher, to all the great spiritual teachers, to all the great gods and goddesses, to all the great, great ones, we very, very humbly thank you for your great blessings. Thank you so much. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Chaliye. All right. अच्छा. Judaism in yoga. Once I was invited by the followers of Baha'ism. Baha'i एक faith होता है. I will not say कि religion है. I think religion ही है actually. But फिर भी एक तरह का faith होता है. Baha'i faith. Followers of Baha'ism to preside at a 3-day conference at Pune, where I met two Jewish rabbis of Indian origin. They discussed the Kabbalah, and I better understood the practices of Judaism after talking to them. There is a small group of Jews in India. Jews have been persecuted almost everywhere except in India. Paris, worshippers of divine fire, and Jews, meditators on the Star of David, enjoy Indian citizenship exactly as others do. Yoga practices and practices of the Kabbalah are similar. After studying the literature, I have concluded that the spiritual practices are identical in all the great religions of the world. The ancient philosophy of Sankhya, which is the basis of yoga, and the philosophy of Kabbalah seem to have the same source. According to the Kabbalistic system, life is associated with numbers. This is an ancient Sankhya concept. Many of the teachings of the Gita are similar to Judaism. These two great religions, Hinduism and Judaism, are similar and are most ancient religions in the world. The Baha'i temple and religion accepts and emphasizes this fact in its monogram. Let's see इनका monogram क्या है actually. मैंने कभी देखा नहीं है. Let's check. So obviously Google पे जाएंगे, Google Images पे जाएंगे. Baha'i monogram. ओ इनका 9-pointed star आई थिंक इनका बाहाई का मोनोग्राम है. बाहाई का 9-pointed star है. 9, हाँ 9. दोबारा देखते हैं उसको. इसमें ये लिखा है कि many of the teachings of the Gita are similar to Judaism. These two great religions, Hinduism and Judaism, are similar and are the most ancient religions of the world. The Baha'i the Baha'i temple and religion accepts and emphasizes this fact in its monogram and its literature. The concept of Sri Yantra, a highly and scientifically evolved ancient yoga process for enlightenment, centers on the Star of David, also known as the Anahata Chakra in yoga, and as the Sacred Heart in the Christian practices. देखिए श्री यंत्रा को अगर हम मैं आपको एक बार दिखाता हूँ. अगर हम श्री यंत्रा को देखेंगे तो क्वालिटेटिवली वो ये बता रहे हैं, मैं नहीं बोल रहा हूँ, वो ये बता रहे हैं कि वो स्टार ऑफ डेविड की जैसे दिखता है, क्योंकि इसमें अपर एंड लोअर ट्रायंगल्स होते हैं, राइट. अपर ट्रायंगल्स एंड लोअर ट्रायंगल्स. अगर हम करते हैं स्टार ऑफ डेविड तो अपर एंड लोअर ट्रायंगल इसमें भी होते हैं, राइट. मतलब मैच करते हुए. अगर हम स्टार हिंदुइज्म डाल देंगे तो इट विल स्टार्ट लुक लाइक शिवा एंड शक्ति and then you have interpretations after that, right? कि इस तरीके से मतलब वर्ल्ड वाइड। एनीवे, सो पॉइंट क्या है कि षटकोण, सिक्स कोण, राइट? इंटरेस्टिंग। एनीवे, सो राइट, लेट्स गो फॉरवर्ड नाउ। ये बता रहे हैं कि दैट सेंटर्स ऑन द स्टार ऑफ डेविड, also known as Anahata Chakra in yoga literature and as the Sacred Heart in Christian practices. Sri Yantra was most probably known to the ancients of the Temple of Solomon, according to this, because Sri Yantra में अगर आप देखेंगे टोटल नंबर ऑफ ट्रायंगल्स कितने हैं? 9। 5 डाउनवर्ड, आई थिंक 5 अपवर्ड फेसिंग, 4 डाउनवर्ड फेसिंग, राइट? और इनका जो एम्बलम है जुडाइज्म का, सॉरी बहाई फेथ का, उसमें 9 ट्रायंगल्स हैं इन द फॉर्म ऑफ अ, दिखाता हूँ एक मिनट, सॉरी एक सेकंड, ये देखिए, ये 9 ट्रायंगल्स हैं ऐसे, 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9। तो 9 ट्रायंगल्स इसमें भी हैं, एक अलग तरीके के फॉर्म में एक्चुअली, ठीक है? सो वो बताया कि कुछ कुछ तो कॉमनैलिटीज हैं। According to the spiritual literature in the ancients, it is very sacred yoga process. It helps one to establish his relationship with other beings, the universe, and its creator. I believe that yoga is a complete science of life, which is equally applicable and helpful for men, women, and children. Religions are social sciences which help to maintain culture and tradition and support the lawful structure of human society. Yoga is a universal science for self-improvement and enlightenment. All the methods of self-growth which are found in any religion are already in yoga literature. कितना अच्छे से बोला है। All the methods of self-growth which are found in any religion are already in yoga literature. During the conference, I found out that it is necessary for the religious and spiritual leaders of various groups from different parts of the world to meet, discuss, and share their philosophies and ideas. I'm very firm in my opinion that all great religions are one and the same, though their ways seem to be different. Diverse are the ways of enlightenment, but the goal is one and the same. If the spiritual leaders meet, discuss, and understand other paths, they can help their communities and thus lead them to communicate with different groups and religions of the world. Anyone who says that his religion is the only true religion is ignorant and misguides the followers of that religion. Prejudice is like a poison that kills human growth. Love is inclusive and is the foundation of all great religions. ये बहुत ही अच्छी लाइन है। Prejudice is like a poison that kills human growth. Love is inclusive and is foundation of all religions. Amazing. Let's go forward. I belong to none but God. आपको समझ में आया ना ये वाला, कि उन्होंने दो जूश रबाई से मतलब बैठ के बात बात की, ये समझने के लिए कि आपकी रिलीजन में की टीचिंग्स क्या हैं, कैसी हैं, और उन्होंने अपना भी मतलब बताया कि आप जो बता रहे हैं सिस्टम ऑफ नंबर्स, वो सांख्य फिलोसफी का ऑलरेडी पार्ट है और बहुत एंशियंट टाइम से एक्चुअली। फिर उन्होंने ये किया कि ओके, बहाई फेथ जो है उसमें और श्री यंत्रम में मतलब काफ़ी से कॉमनैलिटीज़ हैं। एंड उसके बाद उन्होंने वो अपना व्यक्तिगत भी एक्सप्रेस कर रहे थे कि मुझे लगता है कि सारे के सारे जो सिस्टम्स है रिलीजन के वर्ल्ड में, उनमें सब में एक फंडामेंटल कॉमनैलिटी है एक्चुअली। अगर और हर रिलीजन के जो लीडर्स हैं उनको रेगुलरली मिलकर डिस्कस करनी चाहिए सारी की सारी चीज़ें, ताकि बाकी लोग भी इससे बेनिफिट कर पाएँ। और यही चीज़ें उनको अपने रिलीजन में स्प्रेड करनी चाहिए कि देखो ये इनका ऐसा है, ये इनका ऐसा है, हम सब में ये फंडामेंटल चीज़ सेम है। दिस इज व्हाट ही इज ट्राइंग टू से। आगे चलते हैं। I belong to none but God. I once went to see a sage who was living by a river. At the time, I had the foolish notion that genuine sages are found only in the Himalayas. I thought it cannot be possible for a genuine sage to live on the banks of this small river situated so close to a city. But I wanted to directly experience his way of living. While I was still 4 miles from him, he sent food to me. मतलब वो 4 मील अभी भी दूर थे इनसे, इन्होंने फिर भी खाना भेजा. But I was not impressed with this. I thought, this is nothing. If someone is coming to see me, I may also sense that he is on his way and prepare food for him. This is not true wisdom. When I met him, he said, "You are late. I am casting off my body tomorrow morning." I asked, "Why do you not wait for another 12 hours and teach me something?" He said, "No, I do not have time." He had many followers of various faiths. Hindus knew him as Swami. Muslims considered him a follower of Islam. Christians believed that he was a Christian. The Christians intended after his death to take him to their cemetery. The Muslims were very adamant that they planned to take him to the graveyard, and the Hindus thought of burying him and building a memorial. The next day, he left his body. A doctor came and declared him dead. For the next several hours, there was great confusion. The people of all religions and their leaders started fighting for his body. The prestige of each group was at stake. The district magistrate came to me and said, "You were staying with him. Perhaps you know what he really was. You can help me in resolving this dispute." I replied, "I do not know anything about him." Then I thought, what type of a sage is he? He died and created a problem for me and others and did not teach me anything. I said in my mind, if he was a great sage, he should not have created such confusion. This was the 4th hour after his death, but suddenly he got up and said, "Look, I've decided not to die because you are fighting." Wow, what? That's amazing. उनके मरने के 4 घंटे के बाद वो सडनली उठ गए और बोले, "Look, I have decided not to die because you are fighting." The magistrate and all the people looked at him with awe. The sage said, "Get out of my sight, you Hindus, you Christians, and Muslims. You are all foolish people. I belong to God and no one else." Then he looked at me and said, "My son, don't worry. Now I will stay with you and teach you for 3 days. And on the fourth day, I will cast off my body quietly." I lived with him for 3 days. My stay with him was very enlightening. It was one of the best times of my life. He taught me many things. Many times each day, he repeated the same phrase: "Be that which you really are. Don't pretend to be what you are not." He repeated this again and again. After 3 days, he said, "I want to get into the waters." Then he walked into the river and disappeared. When people came to look for him, I told him that he had gone into the river and never come out. They searched for his body and made all possible efforts to recover it, but it was never found. The great sages do not identify themselves with any particular religion or creed. They are above all such distinctions. They belong to the whole of humanity. Wow. Next, divine protection, section number 9. Self-surrender is the highest and easiest method of enlightenment. One who has surrendered himself is always protected by the divine power. One who possesses nothing and has no one to protect him belongs to God and is constantly under the protection of the divine. Protecting arms. I know I know many calm and quiet places in the lap of the Himalayas where one can live and meditate without being disturbed. Whenever I get tired, I think of recharging myself by going to the Himalayas for a short period. One of my favorite places for such a retreat is in the district of Garhwal, 12 miles north of Lansdowne, where at the height of 6,500 feet there is a small Shiva temple surrounded by thick fir trees. In that region, nobody eats corn without offering it to the deity of the temple. According to the local folklore, if anyone does this by mistake, their house starts shaking and the people act in a funny way. मतलब वो कॉर्न वगैरह खाने के पहले उस रीजन में कुछ कॉर्न वगैरह खाने के पहले वो लोग टेम्पल का ऑफर करते हैं. अगर वहाँ पे टेम्पल का ऑफर नहीं करोगे तो दे बिलीव कि घर भर आपका मुंह मतलब हिलने लगता है और जो है लोग थोड़ा फनी फनी तरीके से बात बात करने लगते हैं. When I first heard this at the age of 14, I had a desire to visit the temple. I thought that people create such myths out of their imagination, and that the myths then travel far and wide and are believed by everyone, though they have no basis in reality. I decided to visit that place to see for myself. I was approaching there at 7 o'clock in the evening. It had already become dark. I was traveling along the edge of a cliff. I did not have light with me, and in those days I used to wear wooden sandals which were very slippery. I slipped and was at the verge of falling down the cliff, which was very steep. And suddenly a tall old man dressed in white caught me in his arms and brought me back to the footpath. He said, "This is a holy place and you are fully protected. I will take you to your destination." He led me along a path for about 10 minutes until we reached until we neared a thatched cottage which had a torch burning outside. When we came to the stone wall surrounding the cottage, I thought he was just behind me. But when I turned to thank him, I could not find him anywhere. I shouted after him, and the sadhu who lived in the cottage heard me and came out. He was pleased to have a guest and told me to follow him to his small room, where a fire was burning. I told the sadhu about the old man who had shown me the path in the dark. I described his appearance and explained how he had saved me from the falling of the cliff. The sadhu started weeping and said, "You were fortunate to encounter that great man. Do you know why I am here? 7 years ago, I had lost my way exactly at the same place. It was 11 o'clock at night. The same old man took hold of my arm and brought me to this thatched hut where I now live. I have never seen him again. I call him Siddha Baba. His loving arms have also saved me." The next morning, I searched the whole area but did not find any such man. I went to the cliff and I saw the marks where I had slipped. I often remember those loving arms that protected me from falling from the cliff. It was a very dangerous place and I had fallen. There would have been no chance for my survival. Later, I talked to the villagers about my experience, and they knew about this Siddha. They all knew about this Siddha. They believe that he protects their women and children in the forest, but none of the villagers have seen him. During that time, I was strictly following the austerities and instructions given to me by my master, and I did not possess or carry anything with me. My experience has often confirmed the belief that those who have nothing are taken care of by the divine. देखो, my experience has often confirmed not a theory anymore, the belief that those who have nothing are taken care of by the divine. The thatched cottage in which the sadhu lived was just 100 yards from the small Shiva temple. The temple was in a little clearing in the woods and was surrounded by tall fir trees. That place was highly charged with spiritual vibrations. I learned that a great Siddha had lived there 600 years ago. He instructed and guided those who lived in that area. Although he remained in silence after his death, The people built a 6 foot square temple where he lived. Inside there was a Shivlinga, an oval shaped stone, which is a symbol of Shiva. 6 foot square temple, मतलब बहुत छोटा सा temple है. There is a Shivlinga over there. The villagers even today visit the temple once in 3 months before the new season begins to keep their memories of that great man alive. Some say it was he who saved me from falling off the cliff. I stayed in that small room near the temple for several months, remaining alone and practicing silence and certain austerities. A few years of my first visit to the temple, some Brahmins decided to build a larger, more solid, and more majestic temple in place of the small, old temple which was no longer in good repair. When the laborers began digging around the foundation to remove old temple, they found that the earth was full of small snakes and various colors. So they started picking up snakes along with the dirt, throwing both aside. But the deeper they dug, the more snakes would appear. An old woman from a nearby village would come to the temple each morning and evening. In the evening, she would walk 3 miles to the temple in order to light the lamp inside, and in the morning, she would come and extinguish it. She had done this regularly for several years. She didn't want the temple to be modified and warned the builders not to disturb it, but the engineer who was in charge of the project didn't pay any heed. After digging for 6 days, they found there was no end to the snakes. The more they moved, the more there seemed to be left. They dug around Shivlinga in order to move it, but found that it was buried deep in the ground. They dug down 8 feet, but could not remove it. On the eighth night, the engineer had a dream in which the old yogi who had rescued me appeared with his white beard and long gown. He told the engineer that the Shiva Linga was sacred and should not be moved, and that the temple should not be enlarged. So the temple was rebuilt to exact dimensions in which it had stood for 6 centuries. I visited this place again in the spring of 1973 with Swami Ajaya and a small group of students. We stayed there for 6 days in a small two-storied earthen and stone house which had been built a few hundred feet from the temple. Another old sadhu lives and serves as sort of priest to the temple there now. He is very hospitable and serves anyone who comes there. That place is very serene and beautiful. At the top of the tall hills that surround the valley, one can see the long ranges of Himalayas, as though all the snowy peaks are tightly clinging to one another and are determined to stand firmly from eternity to eternity. मुझे लग रहा है इन्होंने अभी सेल्फी लिया, पता है उस टाइम पे सेल्फी का कोई कॉन्सेप्ट नहीं था, बट देख के लग रहा है कि इन्होंने सेल्फी ली हुई है अपनी. स्वामी रामा ऑन हिज वे टू माउंट कैलाश. लॉस्ट इन द लैंड ऑफ देवास. तो इसके पहले वाले स्टोरी में क्या हुआ कि स्वामी रामा को एक जगह बहुत अच्छी लग गई गढ़वाल के पास. वहां पे वो जाके ही वुड गो देयर एंड मेडिटेट ऑन एंड ऑफ, राइट. एंड मतलब वो जगह काफी प्रेशियस थी. उनकी पहली विजिट में जब वो पहली बार वहां पे गए तो वो क्लिफ से स्लिप हो रहे थे. उन्होंने एक आदमी उनको बचा लिया था, स्ट्रॉन्ग हैंड्स मतलब. और ये 600 साल पुराना एक व्यक्ति था जिसने वहाँ पे मेडिटेशन की थी. उसका नाम कोई सिद्ध बाबा के नाम से वो मशहूर हो गया था वहाँ पे. और अब गांव वाले आते आते देखा कि भैया कोई तो आ रहा है यहाँ पे मेडिटेशन करने के लिए. इनके लिए एक बड़ा टेम्पल बनाया था. तो पुराना वाला जो है वो खराब सा हो गया, उसमें कोई मतलब भी नहीं है अभी. तो अब उन्होंने जहां जहां खुदाई शुरू करी वहां पे सांप दिखने शुरू हो गए. जितनी खुदाई करें उतने सांप आ जाए बाहर. और तो अब तंग आने लगे कि भाई कितना खोदेंगे भैया आके ना. फिर उन्होंने जाके बोला कि चलो अंदर का शिवलिंग निकालते हैं. वो जितना शिवलिंग खोदते गए वो 8-8 फीट तक शिवलिंग ही दिख रहा है, मतलब वो खत्म ही नहीं हो रहा है कभी भी. तो उन्होंने फिर ये मतलब फिर उनको चीफ इंजीनियर के सपने में रात में आया. ठीक है, ये ना हिंट्स होते हैं एक्चुअली. हिंट्स दिए 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 जा रहे हैं कि भैया यहाँ पे ये चीजें मत करो. हिंट्स सांप के फॉर्म में, शिवलिंग के फॉर्म में. बट जब कोई आदमी नहीं नहीं समझता है तो उसे ऐसे मतलब जैसे कि सपने में आके क्लियरली बताना कि देखो ये मत करो, छोड़ दो इसको और चला जाओ यहाँ से। सो ड्रीम होने के बाद उन्होंने पहले वाले जो टेम्पल को थोड़ा बहुत अच्छे से रिपेयर कर दिया, उसके बाद वहां से चले गए। सो समटाइम्स पीपल लर्न लाइक दिस। आगे चलते हैं। Lost in the land of Devas. I heard and read so much about a village called Nanganj that my desire for visiting this place became intense. Many pilgrims have heard about that place, but it is rare that someone perseveres enough to reach there. This small community of spiritual people is situated deep within the lap of the Himalayas, surrounded by snowy peaks for 8 months of the year. One cannot enter or come out of that place. A small community of yogis live there all the time. These yogis observe silence and spend most of their time in meditation. Small log houses provide shelter, and their main food is potatoes and barley, which they store for the whole year. This particular community is made up of Indian, Tibetan, and Nepalese sadhus. Nanaganj. Sure. This small group of adepts reside on the Himalayan border between Tibet and Pithoragarh. There is no other place but this which can be called Nanganj. मतलब वो ज्ञानियों का गंज है, नानगंज. I decided to go to Mount Kailash along with four other renunciates in order to visit this village. We went from Almora to Dor Dorchola to Garbiang, and after several days, when we reached Raksh, Raksha, Rakshasthal, we lost our way. It was in the month of July that when the snow melts in the Himalayan mountains. During this season of the year, the glaciers move and sometimes the entire glacier crashes down and blocks the path. For several days, there may be no way to go. As we were walking, we found glaciers collapsing, blocking the way behind and in front of us. I was accustomed to such sudden calamities, but the other Swamis were new to these adventures. The Swamis were very much frightened. They held me responsible for this and started putting the blame on me because I was from the Himalayas. They said, "You should have known better. You are from the mountains. You misguided us. We have no food. The path is blocked. It is very cold. We are dying here." कितना blame करेंगे यार? My God. We were stranded there by the side of an enormous lake called Rakshasthal, which means lake of the devil. अच्छा राक्षस थल, अच्छा राक्षस थल, okay, lake of the devil. Because of the melting snow and avalanches, the water started rising. By the second day, everyone was in panic. I said, "We are not ordinary worldly people, we are renunciates. We should die happily. Remember, God, panic is not going to help us." Okay. Everyone started remembering his mantra and praying, but nothing seemed to help. Here their faith was tested, but none of them had any. They were afraid of being buried in the snow. I started joking and said, "Suppose you all die. What will be the fate of your institutions, wealth, and followers?" They said, "We may be dying, but first we will see that you die." My jokes and my talking in this situation lightly made them more angry. Very few people know how to enjoy humor. Most people become very serious in such adverse situations. Humor is an important quality that makes one cheerful in all walks of life. To cultivate this quality is very important. When the poison was given to Socrates, he was very humorous and made a few jokes. When the cup of hemlock was given to him, he said, "Can I share a bit of it with the gods?" Then he smiled and said, "Poison has no power to kill a sage, for a sage lives in reality, and reality is eternal." He smiled and took the poison. I said to these renunciates, if we have to live and if we are on the right path, the Lord will protect us. ये देखो, ये बिल्कुल वही बात है, अगर आपने ध्यान दिया होगा, जो कि योगानंदा ने भी सीखी थी, कि अगर आपको यहाँ पे गॉड ने भेजा है, इट्स हिज ड्यूटी टू टेक केयर ऑफ यू. अगर आप सही रास्ते पे हो तो आपका ध्यान रखेगा ही रखेगा. एक्चुअली ये भी बिल्कुल यही बात बोल रहे हैं, क्लियरली बोल रहे हैं, कि इफ यू आर ऑन द पाथ, ऑन द राइट पाथ ऑफ गॉड, इट्स ड्यूटी ऑफ गॉड टू टेक केयर ऑफ यू इन वन वे और द अदर. देखते हैं, दोबारा से पढ़ते हैं. इसमें लिखा है, इफ वी हैव टू लिव एंड इफ वी आर ऑन द राइट पाथ, दोनों की दोनों कंडीशंस हैं, द लॉर्ड विल प्रोटेक्ट अस. व्हाई शुड वी वरी? It started becoming dark and again snow started falling. Suddenly, a man with a long beard, wearing a white robe, carrying a lantern appeared before us. He asked, have you lost your way? For almost 2 days, we have had nothing to eat and we do not know how to get out of this place, we replied. He told us to follow him. There had seemed to be no other way through that avalanche, but when we followed him, we eventually found ourselves on the other side. He showed us the way to a village, which was a few miles away, and instructed us to pass the night there. He then suddenly disappeared. We all wondered who he was. The villagers say that such experiences are not uncommon in the land of the Devas. These bright beings guide innocent travelers when they lose their way. We stayed in this village that night. The next day, the other four nuns yet refused to travel with me. They all turned back. They did not want to go further into the mountains because they feared more dangers. After being given directions by the villagers, I went all alone towards Nanganj. One of the sadhus there was kind enough to give me shelter, and I stayed for 1.5 months. This place is surrounded by high snowy peaks and one of the most beautiful places that I've ever seen. Returning from Gnanganj, I came back by the way that leads to Mansarovar at the foot of Mount Kailash. I met many advanced Indian and Tibetan yogis. For a week, I lived at the camp of the Lamas at the foot of Mount Kailash. I still treasure this experience. I traveled to Garvyuk with a herd of sheep. The sheep herds with whom I traveled talked about beings who can guide travelers in the Himalayas. They narrated many such experiences to me. These beings are called Devas, or beings of light. It is said that the Devas are the beings who can travel between both known and the unknown side of life. They can penetrate through physical existence to guide aspirants. मतलब वो फिजिकल बॉडी भी ले सकते हैं देवास, एस्पिरेंट वगैरह को गाइड करने के लिए. And they live in the non-physical plane. The Devas too have their plane of existence. Esoteric science and occultism talks much about such beings, but modern scientists dismiss this theory, saying that such beings are either fantasies or hallucinations. I have heard young scientists saying that old men who believe in existence of such beings must be hallucinating. Old age is another childhood which is full of follies and can give hallucinations. But spiritual people become more wise in their old age. They have no chance to hallucinate, for they purify their minds first and then experience the higher levels of subconsciousness. Scientists have not studied many dimensions of life as yet. They are still studying the brain and its various zones. The aspect of psychology which is termed transpersonal or transcendental psychology is beyond the grasp of modern scientists. Wow, it's amazing. See, the aspect of psychology which is termed transpersonal or transcendental psychology is beyond the grasp of modern scientists. The perennial psychology of ancients, which has been cultivated for several centuries in the past, is an exact science. It is based on the finest knowledge, which is called intuition. The physical sciences have limitations, and their investigations are only on the gross level of matter, body, and brain. This is amazing. तो वो बता रहे देवास के बारे में कि देवास जो होते हैं वो अलग अलग इनर प्लेन्स पे पाए जाते हैं, और वो कभी कभी फिजिकल एग्जिस्टेंस भी ले लेते हैं कुछ लोगों को हेल्प करने के लिए और गाइड करने के लिए। उन्होंने ये भी बताया, मतलब देवास के बारे में, कि जो है ये बीइंग्स ऑफ लाइट होते हैं। और साइंटिस्ट जो है, मतलब इनके बारे में कुछ भी अभी तक पुष्टि नहीं कर पाए हैं। ऑब्वियसली जो नहीं दिखा वो कैसे, मतलब आपको पता रहेगा ना। इसलिए साइंस के हिसाब से प्रेयर में केवल उतनी ही पावर है कि वो आपको एक सहारा दे देती है। उन्होंने, मतलब साइंस के हिसाब से, देयर इज नो बडी दैट यू प्रेइंग टू। आप बस खाली अपने लिए, अपने आप को खुद को खुशी देने के लिए बस प्रे करते हो, और उससे आपको ही होप और करेज मिलता है, समथिंग लाइक दैट, ठीक है। बट टू दोज ऑफ अस जो मतलब who can feel the energy, we know कि when we pray there's energy which comes down and goes to wherever we would like to, uh, हम जहाँ जहाँ चाहते हैं वो जाती है वहाँ पे एनर्जी, राइट। प्रेयर्स का अलग मैकेनिज्म है जो हम लोग को एक्सपीरियंस में आता है, एंड फॉर देम इट्स डिफरेंट। मतलब जो उनकी इंस्ट्रूमेंट्स में रिकॉर्ड नहीं हो पाया, जिसका लॉजिक नहीं हो पाया प्रॉपरली, उसके लिए कोई उनकी वो नहीं है, समथिंग लाइक दैट। आगे चलते हैं। द लैंड ऑफ हमसास। Of all the places I have visited in my life, I have found that none more fascinating than Gangotri. गंगोत्री का मतलब जहां से गंगा स्टार्ट होती है। It is a land of the Hamsas, where the mountain peaks are perennially blanketed with snow. When I was young, between 30 and 50, when I was young, between 30 and 50, yogis lived there in small caves along both the sides of the Ganges. Most of them did not wear any clothes, and some did not even use fire at all. For 3 full winters, I lived there by myself in a small cave, some 500 yards away from the cave where my brother disciple was staying. I rarely communicated with anyone. Those of us who lived there would see one another from a distance, but no one disturbed anyone else. No one was interested in socializing. That was one of the most fulfilling periods of my life. I spent most of my time doing yoga practices and living on a mixture of wheat and gram. I would soak the wheat and gram. When it germinated after 2 days, add in little salt. This was the only food I took. In a nearby cave lived a sage who was widely respected throughout India. His name was Krishna Ashram. One night at about 12 o'clock, I was overwhelmed by a deafening sound as if many bombs were exploding. It was an avalanche very close by. I emerged from my cave to view what had happened. It was a moonlit night, and I could see the other bank of the frozen Ganges where Krishna Ashram lived. When I saw where the avalanche occurred, I concluded that Sri Krishna Ashram had been buried beneath it. I quickly put out my long Tibetan coat, took a torch, and rushed to his cave. The Ganges there is just a narrow stream, so it crossed easily. So I crossed it easily and found that his small cave was quite safe and untouched. He was sitting there smiling. क्या बात है, यंग ब्रह्मचारी इन गंगोत्री। बट ये फोटो खिंचवाने का शौक था इनको यार। He was not speaking at this time, so he pointed upward and said, mm. Then he wrote on a slate, "Nothing can harm me. I have to live for a long time. These noises and avalanches do not frighten me. My cave is protected." Seeing that he was unharmed and in good spirits, I returned to my cave. In the morning, when I could see more clearly, I found that the avalanche had come down on both sides of his cave. The tall fir trees were completely buried, only his cave remained undamaged. I often visited Krishna Ashram from 2 to 5 in the afternoon. I would ask him questions and he would answer on the slate. His eyes glowed like two balls of fire, and his skin was as thick as an elephant's. He was almost 80 years of age and very healthy. I wondered how he was able to live without any woolens, fire, or protection from the cold. He had no possessions at all. A Swami who lived half a mile up towards Gomukh regularly brought him some food. Once a day, he ate some roasted potatoes and a piece of whole wheat bread. Once a day, okay. Everyone there drank green tea mixed with an herb called Ganga Tulsi, Artemisia sina. The yogis, green tea, huh? तभी से लेके not bad. The yogis and swamis whom I met there taught me many things about herbs and their uses, and also discussed the scriptures with me. Those yogis did not like to come down to the plains of India. Every summer, a few hundred pilgrims would visit this shrine, which is one of the highest in the Himalayas. In those days, they had to walk 96 miles in the mountains to reach here. If anyone wanted to see firsthand the power of spirit over mind and body, he can find a few rare yogis, even here today. Wow, that's amazing. And एथिस्टिक स्वामी, एथिस्टिक मतलब जो गॉड में भरोसा नहीं करने वाला, जो लॉजिक का साथ देने वाला. There was a Swami who was learned and highly intellectual. He did not believe in the existence of God. Whatever someone else believed in, he would try to undermine with cleverly formulated arguments. Many scholars avoided him, but he and I were good friends. I was attracted to him for his learning and logic. His entire mind and energy were focused on only one thing: how to argue. He was learned and obstinate. He would say, I do not know why people don't come to learn from me. And I would tell him, you destroy their beliefs and their faith. So why should they come? They are afraid of you. He was a well known man. He had written a book in which he attempted to refute all the classical philosophies. It's a good book, a wonderful book for mental gymnastics. It is called Khat Darshana, or Six Systems of Indian Philosophy. The Tibetan and Chinese scholars admired him as a logician and invited him to China. They apparently decided that if there were any learned man anywhere in India, it must be this man. He did not believe in God, yet he was a monk. He used to say that he became a monk to refute and eliminate the order of monks. Really? They're all fake, he would say. They're a burden on society. I have found out that there is nothing genuine in it, and I'm going to tell the world. He vowed that if anybody could convince him that there was God, he would become that person's disciple. Once he asked me, do you know my vow? I replied, he would be the greatest fool who would make you a disciple. What do you mean? I said, what can anyone do with your silly mind? You have sharpened your mind in one way, but you have not known any other dimension. He retorted, you are the silly one. You also talk of unknown dimensions. This is all rubbish fantasy. I prayed to God and said, no matter what happens, if I have to lay down my life, I will make this man aware of some deeper truths. One day I asked, have you seen the Himalayas? He said, no, I never have. I told him, in the summer, it's pleasant to travel in the mountains. They're beautiful. I was hoping that if he came with me, I would find an opportunity to set him right. He said, that's one thing I would love. With such beautiful mountains, why do we need God? I thought, I will force him into a situation where he has to believe. I planned to take him to one of the high mountains with a small tent and some biscuits and dried fruits we left for Kailash. I was in a month of it was in the month of September when the snow starts. I firmly believed in God and prayed to Lord to create a situation in which the Swami would be helpless and then cry for God's help. I was young and reckless, so I took him on an arduous path. I myself did not know where we were going, so soon we were lost. I was born in the Himalayas, so I have developed a resistance to cold. There is a special posture and a breathing technique which helped me to protect me from cold. But the poor Swami shivered painfully because he was unaccustomed to the mountain cold. Out of compassion and to show that I love him, I gave him my blanket. I took him to a height of 14,000 feet. After 14,000 feet, he complained, I can't breathe properly. I told him, I don't have any difficulty. He said, you're a young man, so it doesn't affect you. I said, don't accept defeat. Every day he would teach me philosophy and I would charm him by talking about the mountains. I would say, what a beautiful thing to be so close to nature. After we had been walking in the mountains for 4 days, it started snowing. We camped at night of 15,000 feet. We had only a small tent, 4 feet by 5 feet. When it had snowed up to 2 feet, I said, do you know that it will snow 7 to 8 feet? Our tent will be buried and we will be buried inside the tent. Don't say that, he exclaimed. I said, it is true. Can we go back? Can we go back? There is no way, Swamiji. One second. One second. Somebody is using the annotation. One second. So, don't say that, he exclaimed. I said, it is true. Can we go back? He said. There is no way, Swamiji. What shall we do? I replied, I will pray to God. He said, I believe in facts. I do not believe in the silly things you're talking of. I said, by the grace of God, the snow will stop. By the grace of my God, the snow will stop. If you want to use your philosophy and intelligence to stop it, you're welcome. Just try. He said, how will I know if your prayers work? Suppose you pray and the snow stops. Even then, I won't believe in God because the snow might have stopped anyway. Snow was soon 4 feet deep on all sides of a small tent, and he started to feel suffocated. I would make a hole in the snow so we could breathe, but it would soon close again. I knew that something was sure to happen. Either we would die or he would believe in God. Finally, it happened. He said, do something. Your master is a great man. I have insulted him many times. Perhaps that is why I am now being put in this torture and danger. He started to become frightened. I said, if you pray to God in 5 minutes, this snow will stop and there will be sunshine. If you don't, you will die and you will kill me too. God has whispered this to me. He said, he asked, really? How are you hearing this? I said, he is speaking to me. He began to believe me. He said, if there is no sunshine, I'm going to kill you because I'm breaking my vow. I have only basic, I have only one basic unconditional vow, that is not to believe in God. Under pressure of the fear of death, such a man reverses himself, and quickly acquires great devotion. He started praying with tears in his eyes, and I thought if the snow doesn't stop in 5 minutes, then he will harden his heart even more. So I prayed. By the grace of God, in exactly 5 minutes, the snow stopped and the sun started to shine. He was surprised, and so was I. He said, we will live. I said, yes, God wants us to live. He said, Now I realize that there really must be something which I did not understand. After that, he vowed to live in silence for the rest of his life. He lived 21 years more and never spoke to anyone. And if anyone would talk about God, he would weep tears of ecstasy. After that, he did write more books. One a commentary on Mahimna Stotra, hymns of the Lord. After we have gone through intellectual gymnastics and find something beyond the intellect, a stage comes when intellect cannot guide us, and only intuition can show us the way. Intellect examines, calculates, decides, accepts, and rejects all that is happening within the spheres of mind. But intuition is an uninterrupted flow which dawns spontaneously from its source down deep within. It dawns only when the mind attains a state of tranquility, equilibrium, and equanimity. That pure intuition expands the human consciousness in a way that one starts seeing things clearly. Life as a whole is comprehended and ignorance is dispelled. After a series of experiences, direct experience becomes a guide and one starts receiving intuition spontaneously. See, after a series of experiences, direct experience becomes a guide and one starts receiving intuition spontaneously. एक बार इसको और पढ़ते हैं. After a series of experiences, direct experience becomes a guide and one starts receiving intuition spontaneously. Suddenly, a thought flashed into my mind, and then I remembered the saying of the great sage called Tulsidas. Without being God fearing, love for God is not possible. Without love for God, realization is impossible. The fear of God makes one aware of God consciousness, and the fear of God, fear of the world creates fear and thus danger. The atheistic Swami became God fearing when he experienced God consciousness. Intellectual gymnastics is a mere exercise which creates fears, but love of God liberates one from all fears. See, it's amazing. Let's close it today over here. Let's do a closing prayer. To the Supreme God, Divine Father, Divine Mother, thank you for your great blessings. Thank you so much. To our great spiritual teacher, to all the great spiritual teachers, to all the great gods and goddesses, to all the great ones, we very, very humbly thank you for your great blessings. Thank you so much. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Have a great rest of the day. See you, everyone. Bye-bye. Yeah.